That's what it takes to learn dark, arcane arts, like necromancy. That intelligence score isn't just for show, you know. While there are some morally neutral necromancy spells in D&D, the most well-known are less than savoury. Raising the dead might sound badass to the disturbingly pragmatic adventurer, but what about the friends and family of the dead? What about the sanctity of life? The children! Think of the children! But it is undeniably useful. So how can we skirt the OSHA violations here? How can we make necromancy ethical? Leave your answers in the comments below. In one game, we had a good aligned necromancer who would have potential employees sign a waiver allowing him to turn them into skeletons or zombies after they died. Also, I think that the Raven Queen is okay with her worshippers hanging out with non-sentient undead. If you think about it, it's just recycling. They're not using their body after they die, are they? It helps preserve the body for a bit as well, so you don't have to drag it with you. It can move itself around. Maybe it's just me, but I've always considered necromancy to be a terrifying display of power over life and death. I don't think most beings would sugarcoat it down into a casual, ethical act. Power without responsibility is a terrifying display. Power with responsibility starts with humility. If the humility is sincere, there is no sugarcoating and there's nothing casual about it. One would acknowledge the dangers and bear the heavy burden of restraint against abusing access to such powers. Yet, the previous reply points out what even the most ethical necromancers will face: stereotyping and fear leading to bigotry. In the 5th edition setting, I think one will be very hard-pressed to have anyone else accept necromancy of any kind as anything other than an abuse of life and death. If someone desires power, and is usually someone with power and influence already, they'll even be more opposed to anyone who may work the arts of life and death, no matter how ethical, simply because they cannot allow anyone else to appear as a challenge to their power. It will be an incredible burden to roleplay an ethical necromancer in 5th edition settings. Well, as long as the person agrees, then why not? The person may not have any family and does not wish to be buried or cremated. The person may die in battle and wish to continue fighting for his or her side after they die. The person in question may not wish to go to the afterlife. Maybe they made a deal with an archdevil that they now regret. The person may wish to complete their experiments or apologize to someone who they wronged before going on to the next life. The person may wish to atone even, so they don't have to go to an evil or darker afterlife in general. It's all about redemption here. Think of it this way. By using someone's corpse to create a skeleton or zombie or construct of some kind, you aren't harming or bounding the soul. You're just infusing a dead corpse with negative energy. It's a dangerous road. The residual energy no longer bound to a life is often caused by something blocking the energy from moving on. More times than not, it's the spirit's own doing, usually emotional disharmony. Finding peace among so much frustration will be difficult. That's not accounting the energies that deceive for their own purposes either. An ethical necromancer will have to be exceptionally skilled to avoid the pitfalls of dealing with half-delusional entities. Now, is it possible? Sure. Still, it's going to be difficult and a task of endless vigilance. In this example, ethicality among something with so much darkness will be so rare that few, if any, will think it's even possible. Now, I love the tagline for this one. Reduce, reuse, reanimate! Now, it's actually pretty easy to be a good ethical necromancer. First of all, nothing's forcing you to animate dead bodies. With that out of the way, the ethics of animating zombies and skeletons really hinges on whether or not they're inherently evil. Now, by default, D&D is rather annoyingly prone to saying they are, even though they're nearly mindless shells that don't have any souls and are basically rather gross organic robots, or golems. You could easily have a society in D&D where it's actually the expectation that after your death, your body will be reanimated and used as a source of cheap labor. And nobody has a problem with this because they know that the soul already has moved on to the afterlife where it deserves to be. It could even be viewed as a good thing. In death, people give back to the community by performing unpleasant or dangerous tasks. It's a dirty job. Somebody's got to do it, and this spares the living from having to do them. I play an ethical necromancer who refers to himself as a half-cleric. It is the closest thing he has to saving a life, but he can't exactly bring the soul back. The undead are then treated with respect and are never intentionally put in harm's way. The point has been argued to death and back, almost literally and ironically in this situation, on forums dating back to the late 1980s. But generally speaking, yes, it is possible to have an ethical necromancer. Imagine an order of knights to undergo a necromantic ritual when they are at the end of their lifespan, rising from their graves to defend their homeland whenever commanded by the rightful king, bound by an eternal oath of service and happily answering the call. On the flip side, let's imagine a small farming village in which the bodies of the dearly departed will work the land alongside their descendants to perform the drudgery work that are too dangerous for the living. Zombies don't need to worry about getting the plague or any other diseases while scooping out a latrine. You see this in the Golgari Guild from Ravenka. This is where the druids use various forms of fungus tribbles to animate and decompose bodies simultaneously, creating an efficient and effective farming industry in which the workers fertilize the soil as they work. Years ago, I created an isolated goblin civilization that have rejected the dark god Maglubiet. Sorry, dark god, I think I may have butchered your pronunciation. And turned to something more closely resembling ancestor worship mixed with some primitive Shintoism. The ghosts of their ancestors literally stayed around to guide their descendants as an enormous magically linked council, somewhere between a hive mind and a true democracy of the dead. With much more time than the average goblin lifespan to 20 to 30 years, they grew in wisdom and helped their descendants civilize. Each generation's armies were trained by the greatest heroes of the last, whether they survived their battles or not. Like if the ghost-filled family shrine from Mulan was visible to everyone in town and genuinely helpful. Try Kelemvor, the god of death and the dead from the Forgotten Realms. Here's a follow-up question. Is it ever ethically or morally right to intentionally create an intelligent undead creature like a specter or a vampire? There's also the matter of intent versus result. Now that's not all. There's the character's beliefs as well. What does the necromancer character believe happens regardless of what the rules say happens? This is from the view of the character who is unaware of the metagame. Has the necromancer's culture turned to the belief that a body without a spirit, soul, or whatever is property of the world, since, the dead return to the soil or become food for the wildlife, and that those who seek to protect the world have full rights to the dead? Does the character believe that necromancy is a power that's already involved in natural death, and sees nothing unnatural about manipulating the energies for the good of others? Now let's pull a real-life event. VR, so a grieving parent can see their departed child again. Yes, this has happened already. I cannot fathom how that helps anyone, but I'm no Padak. Could that bear some similarity to necromancy? Now, the intent is inherently good. Not so sure about the result, however. And yes, VR doesn't use the actual body, but I'm trying to make analogies here in incongruent settings. A short-sighted necromancer will be a hazard regardless of the intent due to the results, and will almost certainly be branded as evil. So I have a different question. Is this ethicality as viewed by the general populace or by the necromancer? It'll be a seriously hard sell for the populace. Even that VR experiment was met with quite a bit of backlash, and I'm not too keen on the idea either. To chime in real quick, AI voices can now replicate voices so well that you could possibly hear the voices of those you have lost if they chose to record their voice enough for an AI to manipulate it. I'm not too sure I'm fond of that idea either, but necromancy is definitely a little bit different. I think the best way to do this is to have a homebrew world where the undead are not similar to how they are in traditional fantasy worlds. Just to spitball for a bit, maybe an undead is allowed to accomplish tasks for the departed soul without the departed soul having to experience the pain, or feeling unmotivated, thus allowing the soul to continue to have a positive impact on the world and getting a better place in the afterlife. Perhaps the undead have an on-off switch in your world as well, and the departed soul can choose to stay connected or not. Perhaps upon death, the soul can choose to sit in the afterlife or wait to be reincarnated. If it chooses to be reincarnated, then the body cannot be used for undead. If it chooses to sit in the afterlife, then the necromancer can communicate with the soul of the bodies that are used. As long as the players at the table are okay with this, have fun. There's a game out there where a group of necromancers were once part of the culture. The race believes that every one of their people are supposed to go to their version of a heaven, but evildoers in life could not journey there until they paid the penance. Necromancers were to give the spirits a chance to pay penance in temporary servitude. This penance was served sometimes bodily and sometimes bodiless, depending on the appointed path, or bound forever to the world, and in the case of the most unrepentant and dangerous of individuals, bound to a place to never roam free until the spirit relents. Once the due is paid, the necromancers would help the spirit let go of their guilt to allow them safe passage into the afterlife. In that story, one powerful necromancer strayed far from the path and desired to rule over life and death, in direct contradiction to the religious beliefs. That one person destroyed the entire religion by raising an army into servitude before becoming undead themselves, forever branding necromancy as evil, and even gaining so much power as to create a personal hell pocket dimension for refuge, which the few remaining necromancer managed to use to trap the person before fading into obscurity. In the game, the bonds blocking the pocket hell are weakening, and the dead are rising, toiling to free the necromancer. The player teams up with a necromancer of the old ways, the ones who were to guide the dead to the afterlife, to stop the trapped necromancer, and acquired the help of a tortured spirit of guilt who is redeemed along with the trapped necromancer in a big twist. Redemption, even for the damned, something that the former necromancers failed to do when they gave in to fear against such a powerful force. The player learns that the original necromancer's increasing fear of that one necromancer is what turned that person further and further away from the people's goddess of the afterlife until the necromancer was blind with righteousness and hate. Still, the ancient damage was done, and the NPCs in the game never learned to trust necromancers, even if the player does. There are just far too many active, high-profile, evil necromancers out there, while the ones like the old ways necromancers mentioned above must hide their abilities from others. In the game, if the player chooses to be a necromancer, the player cannot use certain abilities in view of city NPCs without being marked as a criminal. So, can there be a scenario of ethical necromancy? Yes. Will people accept it? Too much damage has been done by the bad ones, and the bad ones are still out there causing enough mayhem to keep people from thinking differently about the art. I can see a very small few having their opinions swayed, but the overwhelming majority will never accept it. By the way, the game is The Elder Scrolls Online Elsewhere. Hey everybody, Brian Von VA checking in after the vid. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, ring that bell, and let us know down in the comments below. What do you think about ethical necromancy? Would you actually go for it? Do you think it's a concept that's worth exploring? Or do you think all necromancers are just inherently evil all around? We love you all. Stay safe out there. See you next time. Bye for now.